Hi guys, welcome to the Improvement Season podcast. It's me, Steve Hall, and on the other end is Pascal Floor. We've just been kind of spitballing off air and we're like, we should probably record this because we end up talking about some, I don't know, people like our chit chat, I think. We get enough people viewing this.
Some people do at least.
And actually because obviously I say this every time, I see all the comments, but I don't go in and reply. But we had so many people comment their calorie count.
Which is
from
cool.
The last episode.
And once again, very much appreciated. I said it last time already. Each and every single like, each and every single listen, each and every single subscriber, and also the comment in the comment section below. It's very much appreciated. Like, this is just showing us that you like that journey, like the improvement season, and being part of the entire, what is it now, 3.5 years ever since we've been starting this kind of podcast series. And yeah, I mean, if you stick around, perhaps we can actually make it to the 10-year mark at some point, right? That would be crazy. And then that you show that love in regards to just like posting comments. By the end of this video, by the way, I'm going to hit up the comment picker once again to pick a winner for this time commenting in the comment section below for 1 month of free subscription over on the membership side. But by the way, it is like we assumed that the average calorie intake is somewhere around between 2,000 to 2,500, somewhere around there. Like the majority of people were there. There were some incredible outliers, such as shout out to my man Trevor with like 4,800 to 5,000 calories as a maintenance.
Massing, right? Oh, bloody
maintenance,
hell.
Yeah.
That's
but
ridiculous.
The thing is, also just to bring it up and to be fair, he's training right now. I don't know what his training is looking like, but I would still assume he's training like 6 days out of the week. And also he's doing jiu-jitsu training. And if he is still training twice daily, then he has like 3 training sessions throughout the day. Yeah, exactly.
I didn't realize actually his calories got that high.
Yeah, I was just seeing that. It was like the outlier in a study, which you then have to exclude because it would just like destroy the entire mean.
Oh, geez. And I just want to say, because we did it, we probably do it quite often because we end up talking and it's video and we focus on the YouTube. It'd be cool if you could have like Spotify comments or something, but just to give our other platform listeners a shout out as well. We do appreciate you as well. Yeah. I imagine this is quite nice to walk around and hear in the background. And
yeah, I mean, you don't have to see us. I mean, it's lovely to see my face, but I don't know about yours. So
on that note, weirdly,
what's now?
You can't probably see it on the camera, which is good. I've come out in like some spots. Like I don't normally get blemishes very often. I maybe get like, I don't know, 1 just now and then, but I've got like 6 or 7 spots that came up on my face.
The steroids are kicking in now, right? The hormonal fluctuations.
I need to actually note it down in like my daily planner, like when I get it, because it might be related to overreaching because it happens like every like month or so.
Very interesting. Yeah.
It would make sense if it did correlate.
For me, it only happens when I'm actually overdoing it with gaining. So when I'm actually getting fatter and fatter and it's the summertime and I'm in a gaining phase, then I'm getting like so many pimples around my chest and my back, like incredibly many. And it's even like a little bit disgusting. So, at least it's disgusting for me. Katie has never said anything like, but now this time around with the gaining phase, it didn't happen as of yet. I would assume that probably it has something to do then with your hormonal state.
Mine's all on my face. Unfortunately, I quite like it to be hidden.
Yeah,
but it could be related.
That was the good thing about it. That it really was just on my chest and on my back, because I was deep in the gaining phase, and I never take off my shirt anyway in front of someone else. So who cares?
I'm only thinking, potentially sweating more.
Yeah,
and
this
maybe something related to struggling like with my surplus. Like I'm just trying to push food. So I don't know. I'm very interested, but.
Yeah, I think exactly this with the sweating, because in the summertime, being in the gym and then you are wearing your I don't know, whatever it is, like shirt or whatever, right? And it's just like super wet and it's sitting on your skin like for 1 or 2 hours. Then you head home, and if you don't immediately jump on the shower, it's just like I would assume that it has something to do a lot with sweating.
So yeah, I don't know where we were before, but unfortunately that has happened.
Yeah, you brought up
blemishes
and saying no, you were bringing up something that we talked about right before we jumped on air, and then we actually deviated from that as always. So what did we talk about?
It was your training and how you feel like you probably need to cap off this mass with a metabolite phase because the volume is getting unsustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. No, yeah. So as discussed in the previous mesocycle already, that I told you guys that I'm planning to start this mesocycle off with a little bit higher volumes because of probably some adaptive resistance, being adapted to a little bit of higher volume and tolerating a little bit of higher volumes. And yeah, I'm already at week 3 now. It's getting a little bit unsustainable and mentally just like very fatiguing to then go into week number 3 and knowing that you have to do like 4 sets of SLDLs, 3 sets of leg curls in conjunction with some accessory lifts as well for other body parts, and then hit the training session or hit the gym again like later down the line with already 6 sets of leg presses and 3 sets of leg extensions. It's just like already getting to a point where it's like,
that's like my sessions today, but I'm in my 5th week.
And the thing is that I can recover from it, right? And I wouldn't go there if I don't feel like I could. So that is getting to an unsustainable point where I don't want to end up doing like 8 sets of leg presses or so. Like, no, no chance. Like. At all. It's like you said, and it's like we talked about it before actually jumping on the podcast, and that is the way we train right now, and even with a 4 RIR or 3 RIR, but the deeper you are in a mesocycle and the higher the sets and the lower the RIRs, the very much more you need to be absolutely laser focused for your repetitions and also for the entire set, because otherwise you will not accomplish like any kind of true progression or so, right? If you are aiming to do 1 more repetition than the previous week, holy shit, you need to focus and you need to stay concentrated, and doing this across 4 sets of SLDLs is very tiresome, very tiresome. And this is something that we talked about, and where I just realized like, oh shit, I never really thought about it that way. But this is that many people, I think, are not concentrated enough for their sets, and that's why they perceive things to be perhaps a 2 RIR or 3 RIR. Maybe it is a 2 or 3 RIR, but for the wrong reasons, not for local muscle fatigue, 2 RIR, but more so just like because you're not focused enough. And it requires so much that by the end of a mesocycle, you're not just like crippled in regards to your body, but also just like mentally super drained, because when you're then doing like 10 or 12 sessions per week, and you always have to fully concentrate on each and every single set, and you are supposed to do something like 4 sets, 5 sets of SLDLs, sometimes I'm just like, right before the session, approaching the bar and be like, I don't even know how I'm capable of doing that. I don't, right? Have I ever even lifted this? Right? And yeah.
It's just so true, because for me, when I'm entering that first week, like in reality, a 3 to 4 RIR versus like a 0 to 1 is a few reps. It's not night and day difference. Like a lot of people think it's night and day, and I think it doesn't help with commentators being like, oh, 3 to 4 RIR is like deload, that's easy training or whatever. It's like, no, if you're truly doing that, the reps are slowing down, you're definitely disrupting the muscle, you're getting a pump within the muscle group if you're doing sufficient volume. Like, this is not easy training. Like, it's easy compared to week 5, but it's not easy like a deload where you're just like fucking around and it doesn't really matter so much to some extent. So yeah, it's completely agree. Like, that intent and focus has to be there from week 1. And it's so easy for a lot of people, once you've got that down, to not get carried away in week 1, because you've only got a few sets. So it's very easy to get greedy immediately, but then that ruins the rest of the progression for the mesocycle. And then when you get into the fun, like I just had 4 sets of straight leg deadlifts, and I was just like, after the first set, it took so much focus and intent to use 5 kilograms more than last week and match my reps. I was just like, I was so happy that I did it. And the same with like bench press. Someone commented like on my face after the final rep where I was like smiling because I was just like, fuck, I got it. And I was like so nervous. But to stay controlled, because even on that bench press, I was a little bit like, maybe my eccentric sped up a little bit at some point. But for like a straight leg deadlift, just keep that under control to make sure you're not kind of letting your lower back round over too much or like come out of neutral, essentially. Keep the tension on the hamstrings. Even on like a hack squat, don't like dive bomb into the bottom. Keep kind of your control on the descent. The amount of like, mental fortitude and concentration it takes to hit a true like 1 to 0 RIR. Like I can take it to the point where I'm shaking on the point up because I just know and I have the control to be able to go there. Whereas if you're not concentrating, you'd fail that rep. Absolutely. You wouldn't even get to that point. So you've left kind of reps in reserve without intending to. You've actually hit your failure point, but that's just due to a lack of focus.
Either this or your form is just deviating. Even if it's just like marginally deviating, it's taking away the stimulus of the intended muscle group that you want to hit. So for example, with your example there, right? Once you're approaching like 4 RIRs, shit is getting very, very hard, right? Just to maintain the form. Sometimes, so funny enough that it seems like you had kind of a very similar session as to mine here today, because I was doing 4 sets of SLDLs here as well. So, and I was also doing 5 kilograms more than the previous week. And I was having the exact same thoughts as you that, holy shit, this is hard, this is heavy. And already by 5 reps in, right, just half of the set, I was already thinking like, am I even capable of hitting 10 repetitions? But this was the goal for me, right? And then I'm getting closer and closer, and I need to focus more and more to stay in the proper position, because I feel that my hamstrings and glutes are getting tired with each and every single rep. And because of that, I need to even be more focused and concentrated to not take away the stimulus on those muscle groups, because you would be so easy to then lose the focus and the concentration just marginally, and all of a sudden your lower back is rounding just marginally, and all of a sudden you are already taking away more from the stimulus. And thus you are then ending up generating more systemic fatigue than actually local muscle fatigue. And you can feel the difference. That when you come to week number 3 or 4 and you just feel like completely beaten up, like not in the sense of like, my muscles, they feel tired, or like, for example, today I finished the session. Yes, I was tired overall, but it wasn't like that totally crushed systemic sensation that I had, for example, week number 5, like the last mesocycle. But it was more like, okay, my legs were shaking. When I was doing cable curls, my legs were shaking, and I had a hard time focusing on the cable curls because my legs were still shaking from the SLDLs and the leg curls, right? And this is so hard to accomplish, and it took me at least years in getting there. And I think it will take me even a couple of more years to even perfect this, right? And I think that once again, so many people are feeling more systemically fatigued than they should feel like, simply because they are not focused enough, and thus they are not creating that local muscle fatigue and generating the appropriate RIRs in that area, but then overall just creating a more systemic fatigue, which then gives them the perception of like a 3 RIR. Well, yes, it was a 3 RIR, but once again, for the perhaps false reasons. Not because the local muscle that you wanted to hit was a 3 RIR or at 3 RIR, but more so because you didn't concentrate enough, you let your form slip just a little bit, you misgrooved perhaps something, stuff like that.
Yeah, it's just so interesting, because when you actually get into the weeds of it, it's a very kind of nuanced and like, I don't know, it's a very small subject matter, like relative intensity, but like a failure point looks, or hitting failure means different things to different people. For some people, hitting failure on a straight leg deadlift is when they can't pick the bar up off the ground, but they've let their form slip, the lower back's rounding, their knees like coming forward. Like you could do more reps on a straight leg deadlift if you let your form break down. But for us, it's very much kind of, if we're taking away, if our form looks different from the first rep to that last rep, in terms of the mechanics of it, not necessarily like bar speed will slow down, obviously, at some point, but the eccentric should still be controlled. You should still be hitting the same range of motion. The hips and everything should be moving back on kind of straight leg deadlift, and the lower back shouldn't be rounding, and knees shouldn't be moving forward. So it's just interesting because for them, they may just keep going, and like on a bent over row, for example, they just keep going until they can't swing the weight up anymore, maybe. And it's just like such a different mindset that we have.
Yeah, and the thing is that many people then, because of that discussion being super much in detail, and just like I can see where people are coming from when they are saying like, oh, guys, you overthink things once again and you complicate things. In my opinion, that has nothing to do with complicating things. Thing is that you evolve as a person, and you of course gain more knowledge in a specific field once you are learning things. And I think that everything that we are doing as well in regards to our training is learning about ourselves, right? And thus you're collecting data. If you don't do that, then basically what is it that you're doing? Because then you are just like going in there, you're winging it, and you're just like taking it as it comes. And I think that this is not smart training. This is just like, doing arbitrary stuff in hope to get some kind of results. For some people, it may work, but then once again, it raises the question, is it the best approach for them? Could they gain more out of that? Probably not, right? So with everything in life that you're starting, you are gaining experience and you are gathering knowledge over time. And with gathering knowledge and experience comes, of course, more complex questions that you have then to solve or want to solve, because that is what evolving as a character means. If you always do the things that you know already, then you're not evolving anymore, right? You are staying constant. And in that case, it's just like we got to a point where we have the other things already ticked off. We don't really need to think about those anymore. And now it's a different thing that we need to solve and also want to overcome. Once we've done that, we are probably focusing on other small minor things. And this has nothing to do with complicating things. It's just like the development of you as a person. And when it then also comes to just the question of like, why are you complicating things? Once again, it's not the complicating things that we are looking after, but to get the most out of things. And you should always then ask the question of like, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing everything that I can in order to move forward? And that can look completely different for different individuals, right? It's always then context dependent. Someone who has only a limited amount of time will, of course, have a completely different context than someone like us, for example. Because the question then of, am I doing everything that I can, is, of course, dependent on the time that they have available for themselves, right? And also then based off of external stresses and influences. So with that all being said, when we are then focusing on these kind of things, we are just looking to get the most out of stuff. And when has that ever been a wrong thing? This is how humans always were driven. They always wanted to discover the new thing. They are kind of emperors, right? So we are discovering new territories all the time. We are exploring things, and thus we're then gaining new knowledge about a specific topic. Why would we always want to spin our wheels? Why would we ever go in there, spend like, I don't know, when it comes to work, for example, if you work like 10 hours, but you could get everything done in 5 hours, why are you spending 10 hours for that? And it's the same here, right? When you are going in there and you are letting your form deviate, it's basically that you are telling yourself like, okay, I'm working now 10 hours, because you have to make up for that with perhaps additional volume or with some other movements in order then to balance it out to get the same total amount of stimulus for that muscle group. And there comes the complexity to play. If you don't really think about that actively, then you are probably wasting time. And this is where then the question of like, okay, why are you making things complicated comes into play? Because I want to save time and because I want to get the most out of my time that and effort that I'm investing into something, because my time is precious and also I don't want to half-ass things. Simple as that.
Yeah, I think for a large part of our listener base, they're probably very similar minded to us in that we don't do things without thinking it through and having logic and reason behind it. I couldn't do like, I don't know, various things without understanding it. Even sometimes me and Charlotte will have a discussion about something and I'm like, I'm not particularly comfortable talking about this in much detail because I have a very limited understanding about the topic. And she's like, for fuck's sake. I'm like, yeah, I want to read some papers and studies from respected peers in the field or something. And she's just like, oh God, can't you just say your opinion? I'm like, yeah, but my opinion is pretty useless considering I know very little about this area. So yeah, it's actually really interesting because part of what we're talking about is fundamentals of like training intensity and technique. And it's so interesting how this has almost become an advanced consideration. It's like a lot of people who are more advanced now have to rethink about these things. Certainly for us, you get to a point where it's like, why aren't I getting what I need to from my training? It's like, well, probably you've kind of been chasing load too much. Maybe your ego's got in the way. You're doing the like power lifts because you see those as big, strong lifts and you're doing those. And it's like, let's restart. And this should be like a fundamental bodybuilding, like basic foundation thing to think about is, okay, I want local muscle fatigue. I want to make sure that I've got the intent and focus and an excellent technique so that I'm not wasting fatigue on other areas because I've only got so much fatigue I can spend at a particular time. It's just so interesting how it's become almost an advanced niche-y sort of subject, whereas we would hope it's foundational, at least for our clients that come to us. It's like, form video, like I'm so stickler for getting clients to give me form videos and I try and encourage it wherever I can. And I think some of them maybe don't want to bother me with it because they're like, oh no, I think it's okay and you're busy or whatever. And I'm just like, no. Even if it's just showing me it and I'm like, that's awesome. I at least just want to know, because even at the best of times, you have the best intentions. I will feel, actually on the straight leg deadlift, I filmed my form a while ago and I was like, I knew in myself something didn't feel quite right. So I just passed it by Jared and he was like, lower back, try and get some lordosis, don't let it round over. And I've been working on that and it felt so much better. And now I just realized I'm using more weight than I did in the video that I showed Jared. But now with that great technique, it's just like, you have to take a bit of an ego hit at one point, but then you come right back round and in a way better position.
Yeah. I know that the majority of listeners, and this is something that I've experienced myself as well, is that you probably went into a deload, reducing the load by a long shot on a specific lift. Then you go in there and it feels incredible. You feel it where it's supposed to be felt. And actually, even the day after, you're feeling a little bit of soreness. If you are experiencing something like that, it's definitely a call to wake up. Like, this is just like shouting in your face, saying like, okay, reduce the load in the mesocycle and work your way back up. Right? And this has happened, especially, there are certain lifts that are more prone or more susceptible where you're just like adding load because it feels all right. And then all of a sudden, it's a gradual thing where you are losing more and more the mind-muscle connection, but you still are able to lift that load with, on the outside, looking proper technique, but you don't really feel it anymore. So, for example, what always springs to my mind is something like leg extensions, and what I've now experienced is seated leg curls. It's so easy just to get carried away with the load, and all of a sudden you don't really feel it in the muscles anymore, especially when you try to hold it at peak contraction. You can hold it at peak contraction, but you don't really feel it at a specific point in your muscles. When you drop the load though, then all of a sudden it's like, okay, here in the hamstrings, I can feel it, right? And also this is sometimes just like, or should be a wake-up call for you to be like, okay, yeah, I should reduce the load. Because you're trading it for something better, basically. Yes, you're coming down load, but load, if you really don't feel it in the muscle group, is it really a trade-off that hurts? No, right? Because you are actually feeling it more in the muscle group. And I think that as long as we have those fundamental principles in check, that is a good thing. Of course, when we are outside of that spectrum, because, there are certain exercises that you can make just where you feel everything, basically, or where you can get massively sore from. But this isn't something that you would normally program in a hypertrophic block or so, right? So for example, I don't know, crazy things such as posable squats. I've never done them. I don't know whether they make you sore or not, but this is just like what I'm thinking about right now. Like if you do that for the first time, yeah, probably you get massively sore, right? But do you really think that it's ticking off the fundamental principles of like proper training and proper overload? Probably not, right? But if we are moving in that spectrum, then I think it's always worth the trade-off of reducing the load. And it doesn't really have to be a lot. Sometimes just a marginal decrease of like 5, 10, 20% or so can be enough in order then to actually very much feel it in your muscle groups.
Fast, efficient fat loss. Does that sound like music to your ears? The mini cut movement might just be for you. Mini cuts are like robbing the fat bank. You want to get in and out with as much fat as possible. In a short period of time, you could easily look to lose 6 to 12 pounds of fat. The mini cut movement is excellent. There's group support for extra accountability and also expert help within the group. We have educational videos to keep you on track along the way, and you get all your nutrition and training customized and individualized for you. So if that sounds of interest, get involved with the mini cut movement. Yeah, the perfect example to that is my straight leg deadlift. I reduced the load 10%. I was able to get lordosis in my back and arch properly so that my erectors weren't taking over. So I felt it more in the hamstrings than in the low back. So my hamstrings are the limiting factor. So in fact, I think people feel like they're reducing their kind of mechanical tension on the muscle because they're reducing load. It's not true. You're actually increasing the mechanical tension because now your technique's better. So you're actually getting a win-win. It's similar to people who are like volume junkies and they're like, oh, if I reduce my volume, I'm going to get less gains. It's like, well, no, you're doing excessive volume. If you bring it down, you're actually going to get better gains. So it's a win-win. So yeah, it's the whole tension thing's really interesting because it's like the muscle doesn't know what weight's on the bar. It doesn't know if you're doing 400 pounds, 200 pounds, whatever it is. All it knows is what's the tension it's receiving through the mechanics of the lift. So if you're lifting it better, you're probably going to put more tension through it. It's like the low bar to high bar comparison. People are like, oh, low bar is better for my quads because I can use like 15% more weight. It's like, yeah, but that's not going through the quads. That's going through your posterior chain. So it's like, great. It's kind of, it is like foundations, but it's quite complex at the same time.
Yeah, and I think that also here, what you just brought up is probably a discrepancy between understanding of what true regression actually is, because so many people think that, okay, when I'm reducing the load or reducing the volume, I'm regressing actually. While in reality, it's like you pointed out and said so yourself, actually all you're doing is reevaluating what you're doing right now and probably changing and trading that for a higher stimulus. And in it for itself, that is what actually counts, right? First and foremost, it needs to be the stimulus in the spectrum that we've talked about, because we can always bring up the example of things that are creating a lot of tension, but are not very much stimulative in the sense of hypertrophic adaptations or so, right? So in that spectrum as well, right? But I think that once again, there's a discrepancy of people their understanding of what regressing and progressing actually is. And we brought it up a couple of times of what progress can look like. And this has lots of different phases, but also people have even a worse understanding of what regression actually is. And I would even say, like, before you're regressing, you would need to do a lot of, same goes for true muscle loss. You would need to do a lot of irresponsible and stupid stuff before you're truly regressing. Even if you're cutting and you're losing some strength on a specific lift, such as what we've talked about here the last week on pressing movements, you can bring up the argument of like, you're not really regressing because your body weight is changing as well. And perhaps on a pound to pound basis, you may even be stronger. And even if that's the case, that your strength is dipping, aren't you perhaps even trading it for something better that is something like better P ratio, for example? You're setting yourself up for future success, right? I mean, true regression is actually hard to come by if you are relatively smart about your training and if you are taking off the fundamental things in regards to training principles.
Absolutely. I don't know if I don't have any additional thoughts on this particular subject. I don't know if we had any other updates.
My back is getting better. Just quickly, back is getting better. That's good because now it's week number 4 approaching, so I should be able to go through it, overreach, and then take the deload, and then go into a metabolite block. And other than that, nothing really.
Your metabolite block, just because I feel like it'll be going through the listener's mind. How's that going to look? I won't assume.
It's very similar. So a lot of things are kind of staying the same, maybe in a slightly higher repetition range. If I have something like, for example, because I just prescribed a metabolite block for one of my athletes, right? If I have, for example, a barbell bench press in there in the repetition range of 5 to 10, sometimes what I do is actually change that to a dumbbell bench press, and then in the repetition range of 8 to 12. He brought up a question of like, is that not very much similar, especially when I push the bench press to something like 10 repetitions and then the dumbbell bench press to something like 12? There isn't that much of a discrepancy. But thing is also, with every single exercise, there's a different purpose and also a different appropriate repetition range. And even if the difference may be small, I mean, something like, for example, a dumbbell bench press, if you do that properly, you will notice the difference in comparison to something like a bench press, even if the movement pattern is very similar, right? The marginal increase in range of motion, also the stability portion of things, and also in regards to the dumbbells, it's easier to then create something like a pump in our chest than, for example, with the bench press, for example. So overall, the metabolite block will look very similar. Slightly higher repetition ranges on probably most of the compound lifts. Depends also here on the exercise though, with something like RDLs probably still in the same repetition range because it's still generating for me kind of that tension. With hamstrings in it for itself, you never experience kind of a pump. So with different body parts, the pump will feel different as well. For hamstrings, more like a burn and they're just getting tired. Whereas for something like chest and biceps, it's very much a pump where it's just like you feel the swelling. Also for the back. For the back, it's just like a nasty burn for me. And it's not like that I feel like I'm all of a sudden blowing up on my back and I need to walk around like this. It's more like, it's a painful stretch kind of.
My kind of, pulling musculature just tends to feel for me like tight and tired.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of similar to the hamstrings, whereas then other muscle groups are feeling like swollen and full, right? So depending on that, of course, depending on that, of course, I then also pick and choose exercises. And then I use simply some metabolite techniques due to the accumulation of metabolites or making it easier to accumulate some metabolites, like products such as lactate accumulation, right? Then other metabolites such as phosphate accumulation, stuff like that. And this is sometimes just easier to create with some kind of drop sets, down sets, supersets, stuff like that. And without going too much into detail, that's basically how I like to create it. Nothing that is completely different, but different enough that it's also kind of a novel stimulus at the same time, because this also in it for itself generates a little bit more of a pump environment and also a soreness environment as well.
Yeah, I found myself with the metabolite techniques, so many of them I found are just incredibly similar. And I was like, you know what? I basically just use myo reps, which is basically for the listeners, a activation set, then short rest periods with the same load for a certain number of sets, and then supersets, like the same muscle group supersets. I tend to use that, and those are like my main two go-tos, because I'm just like, the other ones just, I don't know. I'm like, well, I like these.
I think just because I find it quite interesting, what I like doing is also some rest pause sets. And many people bring up then the question of like, aren't myo reps and rest pause the same? And it's not exactly, because the myo reps are like yours. You have an activation set, then you're taking a very, very short break, and then you are going for a specific repetition number, and you go for as long most of the time as you can't hit that rep number anymore. For me, I have like 2 cap off or top points where it's either you are not able to accomplish that same repetition then anymore. So let's just say your MIR rep sets are like 5, 5, 5, 5, and then all of a sudden you hit a 4, and then you stop there. Or I also then hit a maximum amount of sets for that specific week, so that there is even a little bit of a progression, so that it's not like in the first week they are able to do like 7 sets, and then the last week, because of fatigue accumulation, they are only capable of doing like 3. I still want there to be a little bit of a progression there. That's why I have like 2 cap-off points. But because of that, you have your activation set and a very, very short rest time in between those MIR reps. And I feel like not every single exercise is made for MIR reps. With some movements, it's just like you're doing the activation set, and if you're resting just like for 5 seconds, you didn't have for 5 breaths or so, you didn't have enough of a rest in between to then once again reconnect with your muscle, if that makes sense. And that's why for some movements, I rather like to do a rest pause, where it's like, okay, you have like a right around number what you want to accomplish, such as somewhere around 15 repetitions for 1 RIR. So then you go, and then you get to, let's say, 17 repetitions for 1 RIR. You're resting something like 30 seconds, right? Gives you enough time to feel ready again, but not enough time so that the metabolites or the swelling calms down, right? And then you go again, but you still already once again feel connected, and then you should be able to get to somewhere around perhaps 13 repetitions or 12 repetitions, right? You will see a significant drop-off from the first set, but this is exactly what you want to create and accomplish. So it's kind of different to MIR reps, but more so from the intention behind it, and also once again appropriate for the exercise selection. It's not that I think that one is better than the other, or I don't think that one is creating better or superior effects or results than the other, but it's more like, okay, it does serve a purpose for a specific exercise, or it fits a specific exercise better than one of the other methodologies. What do you think about that, Steve?
I think I used to call that a giant set, where you have like a set number of reps you want to achieve and achieve it in the fewest sets possible. That's what I used, or it sounds similar to that kind of like, I don't know, a machine chest press. You want to hit 50 reps with, I can't remember what load I used to use. This is why I just went to MIR reps, because I found it so similar to MIR reps. I was like, I'm just going to use, and I say MIR reps, I don't use exactly how Borge prescribes them, but it's very similar. So yeah, I think I used to call it a giant set, where I was like, yeah, you want to hit 50 reps in as few sets as possible with a certain percentage of your 1 rep max. And it used to be like, you get 20 reps, and then you would get like 10, and then 5, and then 5, and then you've hit your number, so you stop. And then next week I might add 5 reps to that rep count.
I just find that, for example, dumbbell lateral raises is a very good example I can think of right now. If you do dumbbell lateral raises with MIR reps, I have always the feeling that all you're doing is just like increase the momentum that you're using, and just like, it's not, you're just getting to that point, and then you're hanging there, you're shrugging the weight up because fatigue is still so high. And for exercises like these, I have the feeling that having a little bit of a longer rest time in between, instead of doing something like MIR reps, is just better.
Quite like supersets for delts. So I quite often do like a lateral raise into an upright row, and then rest, and then lateral raise into upright row. And it might be like 15 to 20 reps each superset. Those fucking, kill. But it's like you said, this is why each technique is so, like, basically you want to achieve as much metabolite accumulation with the set. So if you're doing that, whatever you're calling it, whatever you're doing, you're probably doing it right. It's probably light. It probably has limited rest period times.
And that's why I like that we are walking the walk, and that we are basically doing a lot of training, because this just aids in what is feasible. Because when you take a look at, for example, the manufacturers of machines in the gym, and we've talked about it a lot of times, there are so many different machines, also from different manufacturers, and you have the feeling like there's so many machines out there where you think like, okay, whoever, the engineer who came up with this, has never lifted any kind of weights. He has probably never sat in that machine, or he's doing just like absolute dog shit technique, because that is an awful machine, right? And it's the same there as well. Like, Yeah, kind of.
I think this is why I think the Prime Fitness kit, if you've seen that, it looks really cool, because I know Coach Kassem works with Prime, and he's obviously well into his biomechanics, like lifts a lot, helps coach lots of people, and he creates like their kit with them or some pieces of it. So it's like, man, if every gym was kitted out with that, that would be pretty sweet. That's normally why for sometimes people probably look at me and they're like, what the fuck are you doing with that machine? Because I'm like, hips are sat back off it, and like I'm having to like work myself around the machine, rather than like just, a lot of people would just sit in a machine and use it for what it is. And it's like, you could probably just move your kind of body a little bit and you can make it work a little bit better for you.
But what I wanted to say in this regard is just like, okay, because we are walking the walk, we kind of figure out for ourselves, like, okay, is that actually appropriate or is it not? It's once again, it's the same with a machine. If the engineers were the ones who are very much meatheads and going in there and actually very much wary of their form, they would realize, like, what the fuck did I just create here? It's a monster. It's what is it called again? Frankenstein, actually.
Right, yeah.
Or the Frankenstein monster, rather. And that's the same. And that's why we are coming to these kind of conclusions for ourselves, right? Because I've tried like dumbbell lateral raises for my reps, right? And not just like once, but I felt always that with the fatigue accumulation, for example, with only having such a short rest period, you are more likely in actually then using a little bit more momentum that I would like. And that's why these kind of things, they come out of experience, and also from then taking a look at whether it's also the same for your clients or not. And this is something that is invaluable. Like, this is something that you don't learn in textbooks.
Yeah. And this is why it's great with the relationship we develop with clients, is that sometimes I'll have a client who will tell me this works better for me than what you've prescribed. And I'm like, I've never tried that. If you're telling me it works better, let's run with it. Let's see how that goes.
Mate, I just had a discussion with Herbert, one of my athletes, who told me like, hey, I started supplementing with collagen, and I don't know what's the scientific literature around it. I know that there is some positive or some promising looking studies out there. What do you think about that? And I said, like, yeah, there are some promising studies, some also that are conflicting with the evidence. But the thing is that if you feel like it worked wonders for you, and he said, like, ever since I'm taking that, I have the feeling that my joints just feel better, right? And I said, like, hey, man, keep it up and let me know in a couple of weeks whether you think it's actually worth it, because I would then even just, like, start considering taking it just for the sake of just experimenting for myself and figuring out, like, hey, is there actually something to it? It's the same with ashwagandha. I tried it and it didn't do anything for me, but also because normally I'm just like a relaxed guy, right? And for others, I know also the scientific literature supports that it does something for just people who are more anxious.
Yeah, I think it's the collagen one. Yeah, like you, I don't really have anything to say. I'm the same with supplements. I'm very, like, when a client will ask me about it, I'm very much like, these are the basic ones I might recommend. There's a lot out there with some promising stuff about it, and you have to be quite specific about what you want. I imagine if you are someone who has like quite achy joints, maybe small joints, I don't know, maybe it works even more so for you. I'm just a lucky individual who has like thick, big joints, and I can basically take anything on, and I'm just like, yeah, skull crushers, fine, whatever. I can do every variant you want.
It's crazy, right? Because how often have I prescribed skull crushers already with the client then coming back and saying, like, have elbow pain, can't do that anymore.
And I'm always like, oh, okay, yeah, this is, you're not, don't know, built like a brick house like me for some strange reason. Questions?
Yeah, let's do this.
Let's do it. So we have one from Andrew White, our supporter over on Patreon. And actually, before I forget, I want to give a shout out to our man, Brian Bornstein, because he gave us a really nice donation over on PayPal. It was very kind of him, and he is the man. And it was completely unnecessary because he supports us in many ways, but it was very much appreciated. So thank you very much, Brian.
Thank you.
So Andrew has asked, a few episodes, you talked about Pascal's client, Z. You know, whenever I see, like, when I see that particularly, I'm like, that sounds like a Dragon Ball character, like Z, the Dragon Ball. He is a little bit like a Dragon Ball Z character, to be fair. And I've been boggled by his low volumes for growth ever since. So this is my question. If we can go into the gym, say, on week 1 of a mesocycle and do 1 set of RDLs and be sore for 48 hours plus, is that really an indication that the stimulus from that 1 set was sufficient for growth? I have always felt like I could barely recover on time from normal workout volumes, for example, the traditional 3 sets you see recommended for most movements, which has made me wonder if I would benefit from backing off the volume even if it seems atypically low. Pascal, can I be like Z too?
First and foremost, I have to disappoint you. You can't be like Z because he's a freak of nature. Not being born on this planet, he was actually sent to this planet just to destroy all of the natural bodybuilding scene. And he is doing a great job in doing that. Or being on a good way. So yeah, sorry, you can't be like Z unless you are from a different planet. So in case you aren't, let's just talk about your RDLs and with 1 set and then being massively sore. I think that, or the question was more so, is that really an indicator that the stimulus was enough for growth? And to be honest, I think it is. Unless it's a novel stimulus that you just introduced into that mesocycle, where it's like, for example, like Bulgarian split squats. If you haven't done them in a very long time, 1 set will leave you crippled, but more so due to the novel stimulus. Because the next week when you do those, they won't leave you as crippled anymore. Like, not by any chance, right? So when I was doing my homework, I was like, after the 2nd week, I was already adjusted to the Bulgarian split squats. Yeah. Whereas when this is always, so when the RDLs are stable for you in your training protocol, and you always do them, and they will always leave you crippled in the first week of your mesocycle for 1 set, then I think that there's nothing wrong with that. Because so first and foremost, you have built a baseline. It's the repeated bout effect is already there. Right? So it's not that the novel stimulus is just like massively destroying you. So when you are then going in there, soreness can be a good indicator for overall stimulus that you're creating. Is it always the best indicator? No. We've talked about it throughout the mesocycle. Probably you will experience less and less soreness. And I would be curious to hear how it is for you throughout the mesocycle, whether it still stays like this, that you are always like sore for 48 hours, because someone like Z, even if we are doing marginal increases throughout the mesocycle, he is always massively sore. And that just speaks for him, I think, being absolutely fast twitch dominant in these kind of areas. And that also shows itself just in his physique, I think. And then once again, the question is like, okay, if I'm getting that sore and I feel like it was productive, could I avoid that with a different exercise or a different approach? Yeah, possibly. There are probably exercises that don't leave you as sore, but perhaps you would then need to do more of total work. And then it raises the question of like, on a per rep basis, is it still as stimulative as the RDLs were with 1 set? And this is a question that I have a hard time actually answering, to be honest. Because I don't know whether, let's just say you're doing a different type of hip hinge movement and followed by 2 sets of leg curls. With making it up for the leg curls and also something that wasn't as stimulative on a per repetition basis with the hip hinge movement, now you have done triple the amount of work. So just like from time perspective, but you are getting as sore as you've done with 1 set of RDLs. I don't know whether there's a huge difference there, except for you spending now more time and more effort and more energy resources in doing other exercises. We know from case studies that there are so many people out there with very, very low volume, who are massive and big, right? And also just take a look at the overall stimulus that you can create on a per repetition basis when you're very strong. I would assume that someone like Charlie Young, right, who is a former powerlifter, if he's doing like SLDLs, I would assume that it just like rips his hamstrings apart. And I think that he is probably only doing something like 2 sets or so, because of the total amount of load that he is able to move. And thus, on a per repetition basis, it just creates a huge metabolic disruption. I don't know how strong you are, but I would, so to very much wrap it up there, I would assume that in the first week, 1 set of RDLs, if it leaves you like this and it's not a novel stimulus, it can be sufficient. It can be. I would assume. What are your thoughts about that, Steve?
Hey, Pascal here. I just quickly wanted to remind you of our online coaching service. At Revive Stronger, we put a huge emphasis on the personal aspect of our coaching. And if you want to take your physique and knowledge to the next level, hit the link in the description below.
No, they're very, very similar. I think the novel stimulus thing is a good caveat there, because like people might pick that apart and be like, oh, how can you use soreness as an indication for muscle growth? Like I could do, I don't know, stupid exercise X and that will get me sore. Or I could, I don't know, what is it, like running down uphill or whatever it is, gets you really sore, and that's like, that's not going to grow you. But this is a Romanian deadlift, I assume executed very well, and he's getting sore in the hamstrings, very specific to hypertrophy. And then in regards to like short-term indicators for muscle growth, like muscle growth doesn't happen that short term. So some of the best indicators, I think, probably have to be the disruption, the soreness, the pump, because what else can you use over that time course? You can't use anything else. And then how do we assess like stimulus to fatigue ratio? We look at kind of those factors. And so if he's getting a huge stimulus from just 1 set, awesome. Like that's great. Yeah. And why would you, because people will look and they'll be like, oh, but I can do 3 sets, get the same amount of soreness or whatever, but I've done 3 sets, that's more growth. It's like, this is where the kind of volume calculations where you just look at sets, it's not always like, oh, volume's dose dependent, but it's all relative to that individual and what they're feeling. So yeah, I don't have a heck of a lot additional to say to what you said. I think if he's getting that great stimulus from 1 set, like run with it, probably have to add, I would assume, at least another set during the mesocycle to keep that stimulus going. And I mean, maybe we should look on his profile and he is like Z's twin brother that we didn't know about.
Yeah, but you brought up something very, very good, and that is like you have to just have some indicators, because otherwise how do you want to make a proper decision in moving forward, right? So while soreness may not be the best indicator, it's still an indicator that may be useful for you to make some decisions alongside with other indicators, such as we all have a head on our shoulders. So you can tell whether a training session was hard or not. And you can, by the day and also by the next day, you should be able to tell like, okay, I trained that muscle group. If there's nothing, then why not do more, right? And this is basically also what other people are saying in that kind of construct, right? Yes, you are still probably growing, but if you are completely recovered by the next day, why aren't you doing a little bit more, right? That is where this discussion actually then comes into play, where we are having Eric Helms, for example, on the podcast together with Mike and Brian Minor, and I think Jared. Is it Jared now? Yeah.
He hasn't actually, I think he is, because Jared and Mike live together, no?
Yeah.
I think.
And
so
they are discussing this exact same thing. And one of the points they're disagreeing on is like set progression, right? And doing more. And one of the reasons that they are bringing that up is that readiness rating. And there are just a couple of indicators you can then take advantage of. And that is like, what are the pumps like in a training session? What is your overall feeling like? Do you feel it there? Are you still fresh by the end of the session? Are you still fresh the next day? Are you still fresh at the end of the day? Right? All these kind of things, these are indicators. They are not the be-all, end-all, but which you should actually always make the decision on. But they should kind of give you a good idea of like, okay, should I do more? Can I do more? Should I do less? Right? And yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. They haven't actually come back to me on my suggested layout yet. I'm waiting. I don't know if maybe one of them is waiting for the other one to come back to it. But I'm hoping they okay it, because I think if they touch on all those points that I laid out in that email, it's going to be one hell of a discussion. And really, it's what we should have already had this year, I guess, with the seminar, which, I mean, next year's coming so quickly. We already have to, oh man, whenever that happens, I'm going to be so excited.
Perhaps next year is just like a repetition of this year, because you are going to prep. Perhaps I'm going to prep. And then it's just like, we're just rewinding the tape without Corona, hopefully.
Oh dear. I was going to say, I hope this podcast isn't suddenly like they hate each other now and we can't go ahead and be like, crap. We have to pick then who can come. Anyway, so next question.
Yeah.
This is from Brennan Castens, and he has asked, would love to hear your thoughts / tips on how to better judge RIR. It's good because we've talked about it a lot. What are some cues / things you look for when gauging RIR in both a general sense or for any specific exercises?
So a couple of things that we have brought up, of course, is like the velocity of your lift in it for itself. When it's a heavy compound lift at 4 RIR, the velocity will already decrease. Then in it for itself, it will, if you are doing a little bit of relative intensity progression throughout the weeks, it will take care of itself. And then by that, you will automatically learn already what a proper RIR is. And then by the end of week number 4, let's say this is your overreaching week and you're taking exercise to 1 or 0 RIR, then you have such a good understanding already after one mesocycle, because then you can reverse engineer and pre-plan the next mesocycle already, because you now have that baseline. You now know what 1 or 0 RIR is for you, and then you can just go back. And then, because you go back and pre-plan things, right, then you will be very, very close to the giving RIR. Because what's the likelihood that you all of a sudden do like 2 or 3 more reps than before for the same RIR, or 2 or 3 less reps for the giving RIR? Very unlikely, right? If you plan things out, maybe there will be a little bit of a deviation of like 1 repetition or so, but this gives you already a very good understanding of like, all right, this is what 4 RIR kind of feels like. And then over time, it kind of takes care of itself. So, of course, then there are some other smaller cues that work for some lifts, and for others, they don't really work that well. So, for example, for something like tricep pushdowns or single arm tricep extensions, the fatigue will kick in super quickly. You're doing 1 repetition at 15, right? And it still feels absolutely all right. Then you're doing the 16th rep, and all of a sudden the performance dips down super quickly, and then you're already at a 1 or 0 RIR, right? And this is something that you will figure out over time. So I think that the best cue or things to look out for is just a general awareness, the prerequisite of always having consistent technique. So technique should always look the same, because otherwise you can't compare a set or a rep to another. Makes absolute sense, right? If you are progressing via RIR, but your form is deviating alongside with the drop in RIR, then the form in week 4 will look completely different to the form in week 1. And then all of a sudden, the data that you collected is like screwed with and redundant, basically. You can't use that data. So prerequisite, always having good technique. Then the general cue is not really a cue, it's just like time. You need to spend time, go through a mesocycle like this, and then you have to, and then you figure it out what 1 and 0 RIR really looks like for you. Then you go back, pre-plan the next mesocycle, and then over time, in doing that and repeating that over and over again, you get a very, very good understanding of what it is.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And I really like that you gave the prerequisite of the form and like the intent and just things like breathers. If you're going to take breathers, like standardize. Basically, week 1, I now put it into my spreadsheet. I'm like, this is the foundational week. We're looking for minimum effective volume, minimum effective intensity. We're standardizing form. Like this is the baseline for the entire mesocycle. If you get this week right, or thereabouts, because you can tweak things maybe in week 1, because sometimes there's adaptations, new movements or something. But if you get it basically right, every next week takes care of itself, because as long as there's no random things that happen in your lifestyle, like terrible sleep, a night out or whatever, you should just be able to eke things along with auto-regulate set volume along the way. And it's just like, it works so like, yeah, I've ran so many mesocycles now like that. It's just so like, there is no you almost are a little bit robotic as long as your lifestyle's not too erratic. It's just like, I actually know next week probably what I should be able to achieve. Like we've said in our training, we're just like, we know we need to do like 5 kilos more or extra rep. It's just like, I know I've got it. Like I'm nervous, but I know I can do it because I did that last week and I know I have a little bit more to give this week, and my recovery, my nutrition's been on point. So yeah, I love that. And I think it scares people. I think you only have to invest a single mesocycle and you've pretty much got it down for all those movements within that mesocycle, as long as you have those prerequisites in check. And in that final week, you truly work. And you should know failure.
Yeah, and the thing is, you don't have to be scared about not being perfect. If you make a good judgment about what the RIR was, then it doesn't really matter that much, right? Because the fluctuation will always be there. It's a subjective perception on your current well-being, so it can always deviate just slightly, right? But once again, what's the likelihood that it completely deviates from what you've done the previous week? It's very little. So if you go from a 3 RIR to a 2 RIR, then you should be able to either, when it's a heavy compound lift, put some more load on the bar, something like 2.5 kilograms or so, or 2.5 pounds, doesn't really matter. So a marginal jump in weight, or one more repetition. If you want to be on the safe side, save the load progression for a later moment, keep the load the same throughout the mesocycle, and just progress via repetitions, because that is the easiest thing to learn that way, right? If you add one more rep and decrease an RIR, then you are already progressing in that kind of fashion. And once again, if you are then able to do more repetitions, like 2 or 3 more repetitions the next week, then probably something is off, right? Because you don't expect a huge jump in repetitions that you were able to do on 1 week, from 1 week to the next. And also, you're not expecting a huge decrease. If you all of a sudden, you are like 4 or 5 repetitions lower than your previous week, and without actually doing a load jump, and also then the other exercise, it's the same, then you've already overdone it, and then you have overreached properly, right? So, and if everything else is in check, right, and you're just like adding 1 repetition each and every single week, then you will automatically get to a failure point at some point. It's automatically happening. And if you then approach week number 4 and you realize like, shit, I'm still not at 1 or 0 RIR, even though that I thought that I will be, then you just continue up until the point where you're then actually hitting that point, right?
In the words of Thanos, it is inevitable.
It is inevitable, yeah.
One thing I just want to like write home again, because a few of my clients, I've said this to them and they've been like, oh, that makes sense. It's just your note on once you go to that final week and whatever it is, 100 kilos for 10 reps at 0 to 1 RIR, the next mesocycle, you know, like how to work that back. You can kind of work. I tend to say like, obviously 1 rep is like an RIR. So if you want to do like 4 RIR, you could do 100 for 6 reps maybe, or about 2.5 kilos is about a repetition or an RIR. So maybe do 10 kilos less. So you do 90 for 10 reps in the next mesocycle. There or thereabouts, you can then kind of auto-regulate it within the session. But I just want to, bark that home. I don't know why I'm saying bark.
Yeah.
But so many, like I've seen people not kind of use that. And it's just like, use your logbook. It's your best tool.
And many people are then, I don't know, a little bit daunted by just the idea of RIR, and it seems so complex at first. Well, in reality, if you stick or if you follow what we just laid out, keep the load the same for the entire mesocycle for your lifts, and then just progress via repetitions, then you will get there inevitably. This is an automated thing, and it couldn't be easier. It couldn't be easier, right? Add a repetition, because at some point you will hit failure. Yeah. Unless you're just an absolute freak and you will go from 15 repetitions in the first week up to 100 repetitions by the end of it without overreaching and so. But this is unlikely to happen, right? But because of that, it's such a linear approach actually. But this you do once, and then you have a very good understanding already. And then you can really start listening to your body. Right? When you have that foundation set in place after that first mesocycle, then you can really just like, okay, and now I have it pre-planned. I know what to do. And now I'm starting to listening to my body, whether this is really here this week now for RIR, for example. And you will notice the closer you're coming to the target for that day. I always pre-plan my workouts. Then I go into the set and then I feel it out, where it's like, okay, when I have 10 repetitions prescribed for the first initial set, by repetition number 7 or 8, I should be able to already tell whether I will hit my giving RIR or not.
And I think you already mentioned it doesn't need to be perfect. So like sometimes I think I'm at a 3 maybe, but I might be at a 2, I might be at a 4, like as long as it's in the ballpark. So week 1, make sure that you train pretty hard, but you know you could go harder, and then start there and see where you get to. And then you've known, because you'll know by the progression through the weeks.
And we keep going on and on and on and on. One more thing that you can kind of shit test yourself. If you hit the same repetitions on each and every single consecutive set with the same RIR, something is off. Yeah. Then you probably haven't pushed yourself hard enough in the first set, and also probably you've overshot your RIR than on the last one. That's most of the time the case, actually. So you should expect to see a rep drop off. When I see that with my athletes, I'm just like, no fatigue kicking in here. That is odd. So let me just point that out to you. You should at least like 1 repetition less or so on a set per set basis, because otherwise.
The rep dropping off it happens very often, normally for newer clients where they're getting used to RIR, where they repeat performance. I'm like, when I walk them through, it's like, it doesn't make logical sense, does it? If you're fresh, hitting that RIR for that load, that rep, next set, you're fatigued from that first set. Reps have surely got to fall down unless that first set is somehow potentiated the next set.
Yeah, because otherwise, logically, you should be able to sustain that performance for like the next hour or 2. Like if in a short period of time, like in, let's say 10 minutes, you've done 4 sets with no fatigue kicking in or no drop off in your performance on paper, then you should be able to actually just keep that up for the next couple of hours, because in the 10 minutes already fatigue didn't kick in, right? So just double check yourself. And this is a perfect way in shit testing yourself, whether you are actually kind of in that RIR range or not.
I tend to find, just on this topic, and we're probably talking about this too long, but I just find it interesting to see if your experience is the same, Pascal. On my higher rep work, my drop-offs are larger, like quite substantially larger. Yeah. My lower rep work, it's maybe like a rep or 2 generally. Yeah.
It's not uncommon when I'm doing or pushing it even up to something like 20 repetitions that the next set is something like 14 or 13, and then the last one is perhaps even outside of my giving rep range or at around 8 or so. It's not uncommon.
Yeah, my calves are ridiculous. I get like 25 reps or something, and then it will go down to like 17, and I'm just like, but then I'll get like 17, 15, 14, so the drop-offs won't be as large. It's kind of weird, but they recover quick, but then they can't perform. I realized, the last thing on carbs, I really struggle. There's the gastroc is generally the muscle group that we're trying to build, right? Because that's the one that shows the soleus is like hidden underneath. So that's like straight leg movements. I've realized because the gastroc has 2 heads. The inner head, I can't remember what the terminology exactly is for that, but the inner head for me, if I do a straight leg calf raise, my inner head does not really get hard and like it doesn't contract fully, whereas my outer head really does. So I've just like my calf just having put up fit pictures on Instagram, and people are like, yeah, you have a really impressive physique, but your calves, man, they fucking are terrible. I'm just like, what can I do? Because I'm training them almost every day with stupid volume at the moment. But I'm like, how can I get that inner head, which is the one that really shows off the gastroc, to show itself? And so I'm going to do a bit more research, but I know there was a paper recently that came out. You can like angle your feet outwards is meant to hit the inner head more. So I'm going to try and do shitloads of those and see if something happens.
Let us know whether it actually works or not.
I'm so annoyed. Like I was just like playing. I was like, why doesn't that head like properly contract. And then Charlotte showed me a hilarious clip, which people should YouTube, of Michael McIntyre, and he has huge calves. He's a comedian, and he's like pulls up his suit trouser and he can't get it up because his calves are so big.
Really?
And he's like, my calves are bigger than my thighs.
Crazy, eh? Crazy.
Sorry for the side tangent, but
No worries.
That clip's hilarious.
So yeah, last but not least, before we end the show, as already promised at the beginning of the show, we are now picking a comment, of course, from the last video. And also this time, I think that this is something that we could actually start doing each and every single episode, right? So what's the thing that we should... Steve, you were thinking in the meanwhile of a thing that people should post in the comment section below,
right,
so that we are then picking a new winner here the next week. And in the meanwhile, I'm going to share my screen as always, like last week. This time I'm going to... actually also seek for the comment instead of just scrolling. So random comment picker, as always, we have the video here. Copy paste the link, put it in here. I know it's here. Get random comment. And who do we have here? It is Trevor Fulbright. I was actually thinking of actually giving that for free to him because of his high caloric intake.
There you go. It even has the comment. That's great.
Yeah. Come on here, just to show it to you guys. Trevor Fulbright. Like.
It had the comment on the YouTube.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Thing.
Maintenance calories are 4,500 to 4,700 calories. So I was a little bit off. It wasn't 4,800 to 5,000. But still, maintenance calories.
I need Trevor
is like
to comment.
Two human beings.
I need to know what he's eating on a daily basis.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Just pizza.
So Trevor, yeah, I mean, you have been around for such a long time. So this is the least that we can do for you, giving you like a month for free.
He's already a member.
Yeah,
he worked that out.
I mean, yeah.
It still works.
I will make that happen.
Cool.
So yeah, Trevor, if you don't reach out to us, then we are still charging you. So that is your own fault. So guys, as always.
I have one.
Go ahead, Steve.
Sorry, it's going to be boring, but it's the first thing that came into my head. I was thinking your training frequency. I want to know how many times a week do people train?
Yeah, that's a good one.
And a bonus point for if they give their cardio as well. I'd like to know what they're doing cardio-wise.
That's a good one because I think that we are living in a bubble. Like, honestly.
It's 12, isn't it? Average.
Yeah, I mean, it's 11 because I'm only training like 10 sessions per week as of yet. And probably that has to change because of kindergarten now and all that kind of stuff. I mean, Katie is starting her work again on the 7th of September after 2 years of not having worked. And now with 2 kids at home, we are already planning a lot of things. And I'm just like, holy shit. This will be the next level shit of organization. And I will even have less time available. So perhaps I need to cut the twice daily training. Set times ahead. Maybe not. Maybe I just ditch the kits then for the gains.
So we get some more kit for at home and just like watch them whilst you curl.
Yeah. Just like build a small crib here in the background and then just like do my training session in the other corner. Just like
buy a dog crate. It's fine. Just put them in the crate. Yeah. What was that? That was training frequency and cardio. I want to hear. Cool. I'm thinking average of four, maybe 5.
Yeah, 4 to 5. I would assume that's the case as well.
No cardio, fuck cardio.
And Trevor, you're not allowed to actually comment on the next video because I mean, with 20 training sessions or what it is that you're doing in a week, it's just like, yeah, people just feel bad about it themselves otherwise. So yeah, guys, as always, thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for staying with us here for like over, what is it now? 1 hour, close to 15 minutes. As always, thank you so much. If you already have stayed for so long, the least that you now can do is like hit the thumb up button. Right? I mean, if you've already stayed for so long, this takes you only like 1 second of your time. All right? So please do that. And if you're not already subscribed, why are you even staying here for such a long time? And then fucking hit the subscribe button as well. So guys, I guess not just I, but we speak to you next week.
See you guys. So I'm Steve Hall, founder of Revive Stronger and a coach of Revive Stronger.
My name is Pascal Flor. I'm the co-owner of Revive Stronger and also a coach, of course.
Revive Stronger has probably been going solidly for 3 years, roughly about 3 years.
Revive Stronger, to me, it is becoming kind of my child, my foster child. It's the gathering and getting together of like-minded people.
We've been expanding the coaching team, which is helping us help more people, but each coach can only help a certain number of people.
Right now, it's all over the place. We have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, but there isn't that community aspect behind that.
And so the next step for us is developing a membership site.
So basically, we want to create a family and a community that is then benefiting from another.
A really cool community for people within our little niche is going to be a website.
They will get early access to our podcast.
You can access us, ask us questions.
The community aspect, we have a forum there. You can ask questions, but also you can log your journey.
There's also going to be courses on there.
Courses, presentations on different topics. Discount of past seminar footage. We will log our journey as well. We'll start vlogging.
We're going to have documentaries.
Our entire athletic journey. Furthermore, they get access to an exercise video library.
The exercises that we love for hypertrophy and maximizing hypertrophy, we're going to go through those in depth, telling you how to execute them.
We kept them concise and also mobile friendly so that you can watch them in between your sets.
I'm super excited to grow this community. The amount of value that we're going to be delivering is huge. And I'd love you to be part of it.
You will get so much out of that.
I'll see you inside.